So when it comes to climate change, who should have a seat at the table? Politicians, experts? What about the young people whose future is at stake? Becky Anderson sat down at COP16 in Saudi Arabia to speak with 3 young people who have a shared aim: keeping the land healthy.
COP16, they call it the Land COP. Global leaders and experts converging in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to address one of the most pressing issues of our time: the health of our land. And young voices securing their seat at the global table, delivering their transformative projects to drive change. 3 voices from 3 very different regions in the world, all distinctly impacted by the effects of land degradation and climate change, united for a single goal, and that is action. Take Billie, an environmental defender of the Philippines' Masungi Georeserve.
There's only 25% forest cover left. Imagine this area was protected by law since 1904, more than a century ago, and yet there's only a quarter left of the forest. So that gives you an idea of the kind of abuses and neglect that it has experienced. And that's because although the Philippines has really good environmental laws, we lack the political will to implement these laws. If we protect the land, what we've seen is that nature reheals itself. Biodiversity comes back. The water sources come back. Climate action is there because it absorbs carbon, at the same time prevents, right, floods and landslide, which are so common in Metro Manila. So an investment in land is an investment in all of those Rio conventions, but also in the economy, because it's so closely linked to agriculture, to jobs, to livelihoods.
Talk to me, Sidesh, about the challenge that the marginalized farmers that you work with faced before you started the project, and how agro-farmers is helping solve those very acute problems.
I myself is a small and marginal farmer, and as a being son of a farmer, growing up I have witnessed all this hardship faced by our farmers and our families. Now we have been supporting more small and marginal farmers by converting their 1 acre of land into agroforestry. I have seen this chemically degraded farmland converting into a beautiful agroforestry, producing n number of varieties of fruits, cereals, pulses, and vegetables. And I have seen how the multi-cropping patterns in this agroforestry is been generating a sustainable income to the small and marginal farmers. It's not just generating the sustainable income to the farmers, but it is impacting their children's. They are able to get the better educational opportunities. They are able to afford the better healthcare facilities, because the income is very much important.
Matteo, you started as a climate advocate way back when. I think you were, 11 years old? You went to your first COP when you were 16. But you're not just an advocate. You've been working with farming communities in your home country of Colombia. Can you just explain for our viewers the issues that farmers there face and the work that you've been doing?
I would say some of the main challenges in Colombia has been the internal conflict. So we have the 2nd largest internal displacement rates in the world. And our city has been receiving in the last decades thousands of displaced people coming looking for opportunities. So I would say farmers in Colombia are urban farmers, many of them. We have been living isolated in the countryside, unfortunately. So that's one of the main challenges I see. And still the government haven't been strong enough to supply and to support these communities in general.
How important are summits like these?
It is really in the political will. It's really about educating the people why it's important to hold our governments accountable for their actions in the environment. Many times, unfortunately, we see politicians involved in developing destructive projects in protected areas. And so it's really about empowering people to make their voices heard, to have them have a seat on the table. And we've done that in Masungi several times.
There have been real calls here for more involvement by the private sector. I mean, projects, associated with land degradation, drought and desertification are mostly funded by the public sector and by NGOs. There's something like only 6% of financing provided by the private sector. We also know that big business oftentimes can be the problem when it comes to land degradation and desertification. Projects by huge corporations have a massively negative effect on land. There's no profit in solutions. There will be no financing of solutions.
Becky, I believe a lot in the private sector. I'm not saying it's perfect because nothing really is at the end, but I believe in the power and the influence it has and the capacities. Actually, Medellin, my hometown back in Colombia, is a great example of how the private sector can cooperate with the state, with the universities, and with the people to all together push in one direction.
And of course, policy and legislation needs to incentivize business to do more. Sudesh, what's your view?
I mean, first of all, we have to understand that even if it's a private sector or public sector or the government, everybody needs the foods on their table. And if there is no land, there is going to be no food at all. But to bring that food to your table, there is a people, there is a community which works relentlessly to bring that food on your table. So every public sector or the private sector can adopt the communities nearby in their areas. And if you get the appropriate support for those farmers, for those people, which will be growing the food sustainably and will be supported in that area.
What will success look like for you here at COP16 and going forward?
I hope that the COP16 ends with clear roadmaps and given more investments into not just investment in terms of money, but in terms of national, international attention, in terms of momentum.
My call to action is especially to youth. I believe youth have the entire capacity of making the transformation. Actually, we're the responsibles of taking that action.
I see the hope that bring support to the communities, to the youngsters in the India, and to the women farmers in India. I see that the framework which can get appropriate support to empower the marginalized community in India, which can empower them and restore our lands which has been degraded.
I think aside from synergizing, we also have to provide check and balances for each other. And I've seen this in Masungi because we face the threat of a massive wind farm development. Under the veneer of climate change and clean energy transition. So that they're threatening a biodiversity hotspot and pulling up the banner of climate action. So that is deeply hurtful to me, deeply personal to me, because here I am going to the different COPs and yet they are conflicting each other in a sense. So we also have to provide check and balances between biodiversity, land, and climate.